welcome to For the Love of Freedom. For those of you who are new to the show, it's a new show. And I started this new show because I wanted to have coffee table style conversations that peel the curtain back on the person and the life stories behind our guest's mission to bring freedom to the world. And my guest today is someone who is one heck of a fighter. Mark Lucas has become a friend and an ally in the info war that we're living through. Mark has a tremendous background in grassroots advocacy. Most recently, he was executive vice president of the Article 3 project, which, under his leadership and that of founder Mike Davis, has become an extraordinary heavyweight for the voice of liberty in Washington, D.C. And for those of you who are regular viewers or listeners to the State of Freedom, you'll recognize Mark from our interviews with him there. In large part, those interviews were surrounding the hotly contested confirmation hearings for President Trump's cabinet, most notably our now Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, FBI Director Kash Patel, DNI Tulsi Gabbard, and HHS Secretary RFK Jr. And prior to his time at the Article 3 project, he was the executive director of Concerned Veterans for America and a senior vice president at Americans for Prosperity. Before his time in grassroots advocacy, Mark was an infantry officer in the Iowa Army National Guard and a graduate of the U.S. Army Ranger School. Mark was awarded the Combat Infantry Badge and Bronze Star Medal in Afghanistan during the deadliest year of Operation Enduring Freedom. He also deployed to South Korea during the height of tensions with North Korea, and just very recently launched out on his own and established a new fighting force, an advocacy group called Veteran Action. Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking some time with me today. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mark, the scripture I wanted to set the tone of the show with today is Psalm 74:23, and it says, "Never forget what your adversaries are saying, for their rage and uproar rise continually against you. It's time to stand up to them." Now, this verse is part of a prayer to the Lord in the Psalms to rescue the oppressed and the downtrodden from the arrogant, wicked elites of his day. And it feels very appropriate for this conversation because, Mark, you and I, along with millions of Americans and people around the world, have been praying prayers like this for the past 5 years or more. But this, to me, also struck me as something of a reveille call to advocacy for the warriors out there who want to take back their country and restore it to the land of liberty it was intended to be and was fought for by our founders. Before we get into your new organization, I'd like to start, if we could, by you giving us some insight in your history as a warfighter. When did you join the military? What was the catalyst for you to join?
Well, 9/11 was the catalyst for my military service. And before that morning, I had never really given much consideration to joining the military. I had some military recruiters come to some of my football games and track meets and would try to talk to me and actually also my sister about joining the military, but I never took it that serious. I grew up in the 90s and era of prosperity, and I was really big into tech, so I thought I was going to go into to be more of a technology executive. And I was actually working at my local telephone company and an internet service provider on the morning of 9/11. And I remember the planes flying into the towers vividly. I remember going through the range of emotions of just shock and utter disbelief to sadness of just the atrocity that happened, then quickly shifted to anger. And I wanted to get into the war fight. And so I joined the military, the Iowa Army National Guard, as an infantry private, went to Fort Benning, Georgia, the home of the infantry, and joined the University of Iowa ROTC, and was really focusing my life on preparing for combat. And I'd missed a deployment to Afghanistan when I was in infantry basic training. I missed a deployment to Iraq when I was contracted in the ROTC, and I was starting to wonder, am I ever going to be able to get into this fight? And then in 2010 and 11, I was able to deploy as an infantry platoon leader. And you know, God has a great plan for us, even though if we don't understand it at the moment. I was able to be trained up as an infantry private, so I learned what it meant to be an enlisted soldier. I was able to go through ROTC and then really learn how to be an infantry platoon leader by going to the U.S. Army Ranger School. I was able to go to reconnaissance and surveillance leaders course and mortar leader and sniper employment leaders course. So when I went to Afghanistan, I was very well trained as being a platoon leader and was blessed to have incredible non-commissioned officers who always helped me along the way.
That's amazing. And when you deployed, as you said, as a member of the infantry and as a platoon leader, that put you on the front lines. You were the literal tip of the spear when it came to war-related decisions being made in Washington. Would you talk a little bit maybe about how being in that position might have evolved your mindset on war and politics and why we were there in the first place?
I wanted to be a warfighter. I wanted to be on the front line, and I was blessed to be able to serve along the Afghan-Pakistani border in a very heavily contested area. We'd say it was a kinetic environment, so there was a lot of contact with the enemy, and it was a dream come true. I mean, I wanted to exact vengeance on the people that took innocent lives in New York City, in Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon. So it was a very good environment for a young infantry platoon leader that wanted to take the fight to the enemy. And it was during the most deadly period of the war. So in 2010 and 2011, we took more KIAs at that point in Afghanistan than any other point of the war. So it was very contested. And by God's grace, I did not lose a single man. We were very aggressive. I told my men that we were going to be the dominant predator, that we were going to take the fight to the enemy every single day, and we did. And one of my men was wounded, but he survived, and I had to pull him out of the fight. He got a Bronze Star with Valor, wow. And it was pretty interesting a period to be in Afghanistan, and that really shaped my opinion of that war because I could tell early on that we had lost sight of the mission. Nobody talked about winning in Afghanistan when I got there in 2010. And now as a 43-year-old husband and father, I look back at that time and I can tell you it was all about a recurring revenue stream for the military-industrial complex. Even though the American people, we supported going in and we really wanted to have our revenge on what happened on the morning of 9/11, our military commanders, our political leaders back in Washington, they really lost sight of the mission.
They have lost sight of the mission, and I'm not sure there was a mission in the first place. You look back at 9/11 now, and there's a lot of questions surrounding the veracity of the story we were told, that the media has told. Have you dug into that at all? And how does that kind of play into your coloring of your, the way that you made decisions at that time?
Yeah, if you look at the initial invasion of Afghanistan and then the quick, rapid succession of the Iraq War, there's a lot of questions. As a young man, I was ready to go wherever my country needed me. If anybody looked at the United States the wrong way in the early 2000s, I wanted to go after them. So even though Iraq was a bit of a stretch, yeah. I remember being like, I'm not sure I quite understand this. I know Saddam Hussein is a bad guy, but if President Bush says we need to go, we'll go. Looking back on it, that was a big mistake. The Iraq War was definitely predicated on false intelligence. And even if you stood by the Afghanistan War early on, being there for over a decade, and the way that we withdrew our forces just in complete disarray and a complete embarrassment to our country, I think we can look back and say those forever wars were a mistake. And we as the war fighters who are very proud of our service, we can go back to the American people and say we made a mistake. We're proud of our service, but we have to be more vigilant in how we authenticate intelligence. And if we ever dedicate forces overseas, those young men and women have to understand the mission. If we can't explain the mission to an 18-year-old private, then we should not be going. If we can't explain the mission to a mother and to a father of why we're sending your kids to combat, then we should not dedicate forces.
Yeah. So well said. So absolutely well said. And it's just an absolute disgrace that we have sent young men and women over there to fuel the machine, the money-making machine. After 9/11, I read this book, probably, I don't know, it would have probably been around the time that you were in Afghanistan. It was called, I'm trying to pull it up. I think it was called First In, and it was about the first CIA officer that went into Afghanistan, and it's like a ghost in Afghanistan or a ghost in Kabul or something like that. And I look back on that. I loved that book. It was so riveting to me. It was a huge, thick book about this man's story and how he got so sick from trying to eat the local food and not having, not being acclimatized to it and stuff. And now you think about the way the CIA is being portrayed as literally being in the media. The CIA is being really the enemy of the people at every step. And I just have to wonder, it's not a question to you, but I just have to wonder if this is, that was all part of the propaganda machine, or even a lot of people may not even recognize the fact that they're being used by the bigger machine in Washington and beyond. So it's just remarkable, the place that we find ourselves and the uncovering of what's been all the lies that have been told to us and all the lies that put us in action. I mean, part of my story is that I wanted to solve the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. So I studied Middle East politics and moved to Washington and tried to work in that space. You just think about, wow, if that wouldn't have been pushed out as such a big conversation point by the media, if war and conflict weren't such big moneymakers, you and I might be sitting in very different seats right now.
Well, they say that capitalism and war don't mix, and I think we've learned that lesson. Because what I saw with the military-industrial complex, they don't want to win. They don't care about winning. And actually, the longer and the bloodier and the bigger the quagmire, the better it is for business. But the American people, they expect warfighters like myself to win our nation's wars.
Yeah.
So there's this true tension between the business interest of these large military industrial companies versus the interest of the American people, and especially the warfighter. Like, we want to win decisively. And I never heard about how we were going to win in Afghanistan. I actually thought as a young man, I'm like, man, I wish I could stay longer. I wish I could stay here in this country, have a longer vision than just 12 months and really try to make a change. But as I've gotten older, I realized that that would have been a fool's errand because winning was never a part of the strategy.
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts? I mean, you've spent plenty of time thinking about this topic. What is an answer? Is there a solution to this tension between the business interest of war and the need to win war?
I think we need more just civilian oversight, and we need more people, more grassroots people involved in how we get immersed in these wars. I mean, there's a big problem when these politicians are so disconnected from the warfighter, from the poor middle class families who are losing their lives versus the people in the State Department, people in Washington who are making these decisions. We need to have more grassroots impact on how we're dedicating our forces. And we really need to be just realigned on the mission of America. We have to defend what's most important. And right now, that's our southern border. Like, we need to get back to the fundamentals of national security. And it starts with our border. I don't believe that the border is a political issue. I don't believe it's an immigration issue. I believe in having strong borders as a part of our national security. If you talk to a young 18, 19-year-old private in theater, they'll tell you establishing 360 security is the first priority. And in our country, we don't have a strong 360-degree perimeter around our nation. We need to fix that. Yeah. And the American people, they want to solve the immigration crisis. They want to solve this crime problem. I think we need to get back to the fundamentals.
We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. Support General Flynn and the State of Freedom by shopping the Flynn Movie Store directly from the button on our homepage at freedomstate.us or through our affiliate link, flynnmovie.com/TSOF podcast. On that site, you can purchase the DVD, which comes with a streaming link. You can pick up Flynn movie merchandise and get his complete 5GW book series. Do you think there's a role, and I haven't thought about this until you were just talking about it, but do you think there's a role for maybe if you want to serve in our government as a bureaucrat, you need to go to basic training and you need to understand what it might be to be a warfighter, so that if you're making decisions for anything related to war, especially contracting,
I
you
think
need
we
to.
need oh, no, sorry. I think we need a balance. I think you need war fighters and diplomats and people with business experience. I want a Pentagon that staffed with the best and the brightest,
Yeah.
people who understand the cost of war, but also civilians who bring a unique and different perspective. But we can all agree that peace should be the priority. War should never be the default course of action. I feel like in the 2000s, it just seemed like we were going to more and more war and starting more these forever type of war scenarios. And we need to get back to promoting peace and diplomacy and making deals that are good for everybody around the world, but especially America first. Like, our number one priority has to be America. We've had too many people in Washington that prioritize other people's security, whether it's NATO, whether it's Ukraine. We have to look at really getting back to this America first foreign policy.
Yeah, and other people's commercial success. As we're looking at the tariffs, it's remarkable to see the politicians that want to stand up and cry for other countries whenever they don't even look at the people in their own communities that are struggling. It's I'm hoping we'll see a lot of changes at the midterms. One thing I was thinking about as I was getting ready for this conversation, we've interviewed on the State of Freedom a lot of veterans, and one thing that consistently comes up is that soldiers often have a significantly difficult reentry back to civilian life from deployment. And I've heard from a number of veterans that we've interviewed that after their personal faith and their family, the number one thing that helps them stay grounded and connected was being in conversation and relationship with other veterans. Was that an experience that you shared?
Absolutely. Coming back home with my friends who served in the military unit with me was very critical. And I was in the Iowa Army National Guard, so we were able to see each other, at least once a month as we continued service. And talking to people with the shared experience, because they understood what we went through, was so critical. And that's why I think it's more imperative that you have those strong relationships with people in your unit, or people that deployed with you, or other people that just understand the combat experience. I think is very vital to that reentry, along with having very strong faith, strong family network, and people that you can go to just to talk through some of these issues.
Yeah, even as you were talking from the beginning of this conversation, it's clear that, there's not a bitterness necessarily toward the government for lying, because you know that God uses all things for good. And obviously, He's using the experiences and the training that you've had to put you in position to do some other kind of fighting. And now you're fighting, after you left the National Guard, you took that fight to Washington in a big way. How did the two compare? And I'm sure you found some of your skills to be pretty transferable.
Well, I had the privilege of leading Concerned Veterans for America, and that's why I moved to Washington, D.C. for 5 years. I joke it was the worst 5 years of my life because I was living inside the swamp. But I had a very important mission, and that was to work with President Trump and Congress to pass two of the most historic reforms in VA healthcare history. And that was the Mission Act, which provided choice in veteran healthcare, and also the VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act, which would allow us to fire bad VA employees and provide protection for whistleblowers, those employees who wanted to do the right thing, to come forward and tell the truth. So that was a huge mission. We had 36 different states under Concerned Veterans for America. We were able to connect grassroots volunteers, whether they're veterans or friends and family of veterans, to their lawmakers, to tell them to put veterans first. It was a great, great accomplishment. In Washington is a place that's out of touch with reality. I don't think I'm breaking news there. And they need to constantly be reminded by grassroots people of what their priorities are. And we're able to deliver President Trump one of his signature victories in his first term.
Incredible. Now, President Trump took the VA forward, and I know you were a big part of that. obviously the last 4 years were an abomination beyond words. So it took us many steps backwards, maybe even decades backwards in terms of service to the veterans specifically. What's it going to take to turn that ship around? Or, I mean, there's probably not a button that a person can press to fix this overnight.
The VA, unfortunately, has a major ideological problem. There's a lot of people in the VA headquarters that want to protect the bureaucracy. They want to protect union jobs versus the mission that most of the American people support, which is provide very good health care to our veterans.
Yeah.
And what we've seen is the VA has grown enormously with their budget, with their staffing, with their buildings. We've seen the veteran population decrease, and we still see care going down. Like, we throw all this money, all this staffing at the VA, and they continue to do a bad job. There's just a story recently of a Navy veteran who went to the Audie Murphy VA hospital. He couldn't be seen. They wouldn't listen to him. They just wanted to give him more pills. And he shot himself in the head in the front of the VA hospital. That's a cry for help, and that's sending a message. We've heard these stories of countless suicides occurring on VA grounds. Veterans aren't being served. And so my philosophy is that veterans should have a choice in their health care. If you're not happy with your VA hospital, you should be able to go across the street to a private healthcare clinic.
Yeah.
And Democrats and the Biden administration, instead of serving vets, they wanted to protect the bureaucracy of the VA.
Is there a place for veteran hospitals anymore, or should the whole thing just move to the private industry?
I think the VA plays a very important role in rural America. I believe that if they can specialize in post-traumatic stress and TBI and Agent Orange and burn pit type of
Point being if, right? The key word being if.
If, I mean, the whole philosophy should be that the VA should be hyper focused on serving veteran specific issues.
Yeah.
But they've grown into this monstrosity where a lot of Democrats view the VA as a proving ground for government-run healthcare, when I just want it to be focused on serving the veterans. So it gets back to choice, and I believe that the veteran earned the right by putting on that uniform, by going overseas, by being willing to die for this country. They should be able to pick their health care. I want to put the choice in the veterans' hands, not in bureaucrats in Washington.
Yeah. Do you have any insider information on when Elon and his team are going to be hitting the VA?
I think they already are, and they've identified waste, fraud, and abuse, and I think they outlined the ability to reduce the staffing there and to really refocus it on healthcare.
Well, that will be a miracle. I'm just really hopeful that we see a turnaround there, because veterans deserve it, and because, I mean, it is, veterans should be the crown jewel of our country, right? I mean, these are the men and women who have put themselves in harm's way at great cost to themselves and their families. And we can't even make sure that they are taken care of when they get home. It's an absolute disgrace. I think it's a black mark on the country. And I know that President Trump's committed to turning that around, but I hope we start seeing some meaningful change at the clinical level.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that Veteran Action supports President Trump wholeheartedly is because we saw his record for defending veterans in his first term. Those two signature policy victories we talked about, the VA Accountability Act and the Mission Act, we saw what he did in his first term, and he is truly dedicated to our nation's heroes. And that's why Veteran Action supports him and his veteran agenda, which will really give veterans more choice in their health care and give them the care that they deserve.
Yeah, they do deserve it. So, Mark, tell us a little bit about your new organization. You mentioned to me offline that this is not something you were ever looking to start, but here you are. So tell us what it's about and what you're doing.
Veteran Action is a smash-mouth grassroots organization that will defend veterans and President Trump's America First foreign policy. I saw a gap for an America First type of veteran organization that can pass good policy in Washington, but also understands the politics. And we will hold politicians accountable if they want veterans in their campaign ads, if they want to talk about what they do for vets, they need to deliver. And Veteran Action will be purely focused on passing good policy and holding politicians accountable. I say that we're not building homes for homeless vets. We're not giving away wheelchairs to veterans, which are important things. We're going to be that smash mouth political organization that passes policy change.
The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing around the world with the Slenderize drops. These homeopathic drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, help balance the body's pH, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. I've heard firsthand testimonials from droppers in their 20s to droppers in their 80s who say that the Slenderize drops have completely revolutionized their lives. Try the drops today to see the results for yourself. To learn more about the Slenderize drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at info@freedomstate.us and put drops in the subject line, or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. We also have links to those in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the state of freedom. Well, speaking of Smash Mouth, I heard there's someone, a very special guest coming to your state who I may enjoy smashing in the mouth. It's not very kind to say that, but Pete Buttigieg coming to Iowa. What's he doing over there?
Pete Buttigieg is coming to Cedar Rapids, Iowa for a veteran town hall. And Veteran Action is spreading the word about Pete Buttigieg's woke policies for the VA. He wanted to just name a female to the VA. He wanted to name a female to the Secretary of Defense position. He's wanted to promote these woke policies instead of having a merit-based focus for these policies or for these positions. And so Pete Buttigieg also wanted to have taxpayer-funded gender surgery at the VA. He wanted to change the motto of the VA that Abraham Lincoln instituted to make it more gender specific. So Pete Buttigieg just wants to bring these woke policies, and it's obvious that he's running for president. He's coming to Iowa early. He's going to talk about his veteran record, even though he has been against President Trump's reforms of the VA. And so Pete Buttigieg is being put on notice, and I'll ensure that Veteran Action holds him accountable when he goes to Iowa, New Hampshire, all these other states, to let people know what his real record is on the VA and on the Department of Defense.
Well, forgive me for being dense here, but what in the world does he have to do with any veteran anything? Am I missing something? He was Secretary of Transportation and did a pretty horrible garbage job of that. I do remember those videos of seeing the Secret Service pulling his bicycle out of the back of his armored car and letting him ride his bike 1 block to the department so he could have his little Instagram photo op. But has he done anything related to veterans? He was in the military?
He did serve, and he deployed to Afghanistan. So he's done a lot of these veteran type of town halls, and this is just the first one in Iowa early on for his what we expect to be a presidential election. You know, in Iowa in 2020, he won the Iowa caucus. He also, I believe, narrowly won or lost in New Hampshire. So he was a significant candidate in the Democrat Party before they all aligned around Joe Biden. So he's going to be talking about what President Trump's doing at the VA. We're seeing these false accusations that we're just trying to slash the VA and take away jobs that will reduce veteran health care. No, we're trying to streamline and refocus the VA. So it's a sign of things to come for Pete Buttigieg as he will probably emerge as one of the leading candidates in 2028.
Which is one of the most ridiculous things I could possibly think. I mean, all I can think of, and I don't know if it was a meme, Mark, or if it was reality, but was he trying to breastfeed his child when he was on paternity leave? Okay, well, I think the meme speaks volumes, and it goes to all of this trans agenda, all of this woke, anti-gender agenda. Anyway, it's...
And he is a
joke.
Yeah, Pete Buttigieg, he wanted to bring this DEI woke type of politics to the Department of Veterans Affairs, to the Department of Defense. He wanted to rescind the transgender ban in the military. He wanted to remove racism and white nationalism from the military. These were all outlined in his Pete for America campaign website. He talked about all this openly. So we're going to make sure that the American people know what Pete Buttigieg's woke agenda is for the military and for veterans.
Well, great. Great. What else do you have up your sleeve?
Well, Veteran Action is also supporting Matt Lomeyer, who's been nominated to be the Undersecretary of the Air Force. Matt Lomeyer was an incredible Air Force F-15 pilot. He was also a commander of Space Force. He lost his command in Space Force for speaking out against the DEI agenda. Matt Lomeyer will be an incredible member of the team at DOD for President Trump and for Pete Hegseth. So we're supporting his confirmation. And you can go to veteranaction.org and click on the Take Action button, and you can contact your United States senators to tell them to vote yes to confirm Matt Lomeyer for the Air Force.
Beautiful. And folks might be like me and remember he spoke up at a rally. I believe he was on a panel at a rally and asked President Trump a question about reinstatement and moving moving the Department of Defense forward after the extreme mishandling of the COVID forced vaccines. And President Trump said something like he's straight out of central casting and he's the right guy for a job and he would hire him on the spot, basically.
That's correct. It was a rally, I believe, outside of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And Mr. Lomeyer talked about his record in the Air Force, in the Space Force, talked about DEI, and President Trump said, I'll hire you right on the spot. And they went backstage, and President Trump said, yes, I'm serious. I know my men when I see them. I want you a part of this team. And another campaign promise from President Trump that he's upheld, and he nominated him. And Matt Lomeyer went through his confirmation hearing in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. So that'll come up for a vote soon, and it'll go to the floor of the Senate. So again, you can support Matt Lomeyer, who is not only just an incredible military officer, he graduated from the Air Force Academy. Again, I said he was a great F-15 pilot. I looked at some of his officer evaluation reports. He consistently was at the top of his class. He's a very good officer, but also he was brave enough to stand forward and to call out this wokeism, and he lost his job for it. So I believe he'll go in and do an incredible job at the Air Force to help root out these woke policies and really return our military back to the core fundamentals.
And it'll be so great to see secretaries of the different branches really be strong. I mean, strong with experience in the actual branch that they're serving, and strong intellectuals with a moral compass. It's going to be a beautiful thing whenever we see the full thing come and blossom. But I know Trump is working hard to make that happen. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking some time with me. I know you've got a lot going on, and this is just one of the hats that you're wearing these days. But I really appreciate you giving us some insight into the man behind the mission. And if we can be helpful in any way to get your message out on behalf of veterans or in conjunction with veterans, you just let us know.
Thank you so much for having me on.
We'll see you soon, Mark. Thank you for joining me today on For the Love of Freedom. I hope you were inspired by my guest and their mission to bring freedom to the world. You can stay updated on the show and my upcoming guests on all of the State of Freedom platforms, and a reminder that I'm live every Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Central.